have this feeling anytime you choose.
Hello everyone, welcome to Utopia. This is the third video of the three-part series about the FSP or Fachsprachprüfung. In this video we will talk finally about the exam, how to prepare for it, what you need to study and all about it. Before we start with all the three parts of the exam, I would like to tell you that down in the description below I put a link to a Google Drive folder where I have put all of the information that you need to study in order to pass the exam. Now in this video I will be referring a couple of times to it, so just go down and click on it so you see what I'm talking about. So as you know, the exam has three main parts: patient-doctor conversation, documentation and doctor-doctor conversation. The first part, patient-doctor conversation, you are talking to one of the prüfer who pretends to be the patient, and he or she will be giving you all of the complaints and you will have to ask the right questions and document everything down. After many people doing this exam and sharing their cases, a compilation of all possible cases and diseases has been made. There are approximately 40, and I would recommend you to make sure you know everything about them. The compilation is in the folder number 5 under the name Haupterkrankungen. While you do this part of the exam, it is very important that you do not forget any questions, since a mistake is punished very heavily in this first part of the exam. Therefore, I recommend you also to practice a lot, and the best way to practice is to find a partner. I personally wrote in a random WhatsApp group about this exam and I looked for partners to do it with me, and I spent every day 2 to 3 hours talking to a different person, making more and more simulations. Once I would pretend to be the patient and the other times I would be the doctor. You write it down, and after the call you sit down and you do the second part of documentation. About what and how it should be asked, you can follow the document in folder number 1 called Anamnesegespräch. I threw in there another document with some tips in case that's useful. During this part of the talk with the patient will try to derail the conversation from you, and they will start telling you stuff that has nothing to do with the case. For example, how the son didn't visit for Christmas, or how they like to bake a pie, or whatever. So in this case it's very important that you stop them from talking and you redirect the conversation back to where you want it. This is something that you can also train with your partner as you practice. Remember that this part of the exam only takes 20 minutes and there's a lot to ask, so there's no time to lose. The second part of the exam is to write down the anamnesis. You can take the paper that you used in the first part of the exam to take notes and a paper, and you are left alone with 20 minutes. Everything you write has to be written in subjunctive in a very specific way. In the folder number 2 there are 2 documents. The first one shows how the exam will look like. The second one has about 30 cases written down. I recommend you to read all 30 cases again and again until you can predict everything that is going to be written there and how it's going to be written there, only looking at the disease. As I said before, after you do the simulation with a colleague, I recommend you to write it down and that you practice writing it yourself. After you have written 30 times or 40 times, it will come automatically, and you will not need time to think about what kind of grammar you need to use, because for this part you also have 20 minutes and there's no time to think. There's literally only time to write, so it's important that you write everything like a machine. Part number 3, patient-doctor conversation. This part is the most difficult to study for because it's a natural conversation between you and the doctor, and it's almost impossible to predict what the doctor is going to ask you and when the doctor is going to interrupt you, so there's no real way to prepare for it other than preparing for everything at the same time. What is clear is that if you documented everything perfectly in the first part and you understood everything and you did not forget to ask anything, there is nothing they can ask you that you don't have an answer to. There is one thing, however, that can be predicted, and they will ask you 100% of the times, which is almost at the end. The doctor will tell you, pretend that I am a patient, now explain me what is an endoscopy, or explain me what is a CT. This is something you can prepare for. That's why in the folder number 5 there's a document called Aufklärung, in which you have to learn by heart every single line of every single test that you might have to explain to the patient. So after the 3 main parts are done, they hand you a paper with 10 Fachbegriffe, with 10 terms, which are written in medical German, and you are supposed to write next to them the Umgangssprache version of that word. For example, polio is Kinderlähmung. All of these words need to be learned both in medical and colloquial German. With the patient, during part number 1, you will have to use the colloquial terms. During the third part, since you're talking to a doctor, you will have to use the medical terms. In the folder number 5, there's a list with all of the terms that you will need to learn. There are about 2000, so you better get started. And that's everything about the exam. In the folders that I have in the link down below, there's a lot of information more, because obviously I cannot talk about everything in a 10-minute video, but if you have any questions, feel free to write down in the comments and I will be glad to answer them. And other than that, a lot of luck and viel Erfolg. Tschüss!